Hi there, this is Michael Buckoff from BetterTOEFLScores.com. Let's take a look at a question I got from one of my paying subscribers at Better TOEFL Scores. He says, Dear Michael, usually I use the present tense in the TOEFL IBT reading independent task. I have difficulty in using the present progressive in this task. For example, when I talk about the teacher in calculus lesson, I can say, he is giving the lecture and examples in this lesson. Also, I can say he gives the lecture and examples in this lesson. Please provide me with which context I can use the present progressive in writing. So I think what my student is asking me, and this is probably a question you might be thinking yourself, is on the TOEFL you have the integrated speaking tasks, in which case sometimes you read, listen, and then speak. And you also have the TOEFL integrated writing task, in which case you read, listen, and then write. So I think his question is, what is the best verb tense in between the simple present tense and the present progressive tense, specifically during the integrated speaking and writing tasks for the TOEFL IBT. So first of all, I wanted to let Waleed know that this is actually a very good question. You're trying to take grammar and not just understand what the grammar is, but how to use it in the right context. Now, I already like the question you're asking me because a lot of students are probably using the past tense when they're summarizing readings and lectures on the TOEFL, and it's going to be very difficult for them to complete those tasks using the past tense. So I'm glad that you're asking me about the present, because I think the present tense is the right tense to use. Alright, let's take a look at the simple present and the present progressive. First of all, we'll talk about some general reasons why we use these two verb tenses, and then we'll put it within the proper context of the TOEFL IBT integrated speaking and writing tasks. Okay, first of all, are you talking about an action or activity which is just happening in general? For example, let me give you a sample sentence here. I might say something like, I might say, Michael, let's say I go to a movie every Friday, right? Something that I do generally. Okay, so I might say here, Michael watches a movie every Friday. Now, let's compare that with another sentence. Let's take this one, just copy it really fast. At this point, I'm going to talk about it's happening right now at the moment of speaking. So I'm going to change this. I could just say Michael is watching a movie, which implies I'm doing it right now, but it's pretty common with the present progressive. We have certain kinds of words that tell us that something's happening. So I have Michael is watching a movie right now. So in this case, I'm talking about an action or activity which is happening at the moment of speaking. So first of all, in general, the simple present is good. Happening right now, the present progressive. Okay, in this case, are you talking about present actions happening one after the other? Let me give you a sample sentence, probably make more sense to you. I might say here, in this case, notice I have a semicolon here. I'm joining two separate independent clauses here. So here, Sal attends class, then he does his homework. So you have one action happening in the present, and it's followed by another action happening in the present. But these things are not happening at the same time. So Sal attends class, then he does his homework. Now how about this one? How about you have several actions which maybe are happening at the same time. In this case, we have Sal is playing football and his friends are watching. Now, a lot of books, this is kind of a side issue, but a lot of writing handbooks, they'll say the comma that separates the two independent clauses is optional, especially since the first independent clause is only 4 words. There's no danger of misreading the sentence. Anyway, so in this case, if you're talking about present actions happening one after the other, as in this example, the simple present works very well. Now, if you're talking about two actions maybe happening at the same time, and you're discussing things in the present, then maybe the present progressive is your better choice. Okay, so the next question would be, are you discussing an action or activity which is set to a particular timetable or schedule? For example, you might say, the movie starts at 8 p.m. So that's a particular timetable. So the simple present works pretty good in this situation. Now let's say you want to say, here, I'm going to watch a movie later on. In this case, you're talking about an activity which is arranged for the near future. So, timetable or schedule, simple present works pretty well. Something that's arranged for the near future, the present progressive. With the simple present, do you want to discuss a daily routine, something that you do regularly? You might say, let's say Sue Jen practices TOEFL speaking at the school in this case. It's just something that you're saying, it's kind of like a habit, it's occurring regularly. So in this case, Sue Jen practices TOEFL speaking at the school. Now, if you want to talk about an action or activity which is limited by a period of time, and that's a question you want to ask yourself, then the present progressive might be better. So in this case, you may say something like, Sue Jen is going to school this week to practice TOEFL speaking. So in this case, the actual action or activity of going to school is something which doesn't happen all the time, but it's happening this specific week, so it's limited. So then my question here is if you're talking about a daily routine, the simple present probably is going to work better. If you're discussing an action or activity which is limited by a period of time, the present progressive is probably going to work better for you. Let's take a look at some common verbs which use the simple present tense. Now, I'm not going to give you the entire list of dozens and dozens of verbs, but I'll give you the type of verb and then one example. For example, state, be. You might say, I am at the beach. In this case, you're discussing a state of being. Possession. The simple present works pretty well. If I said the car belongs to, let's say, Tom. So I'm discussing ownership. Verbs which have to do with sense. If I said I feel the wind blowing against my face. In this case, I would not say I am feeling the wind. I'd say I feel the wind blow against my face. You're discussing something happening in the present here. Okay, how about expressing a feeling? You might say, I like to read books in my free time, in that case. All right, let's take a look at another one. This one, I'm going to classify it more in terms of what I call brain work. It's sometimes things that you're thinking, maybe, about things, especially with TOEFL reading passages or lectures. Believe. For example, I might say the author believes that cell division is an essential part of evolution. In this case, I think the simple present works better. You're not going to say here the author is believing that. So the author believes that cell division is an essential part of evolution. And then the last reason I think with the simple present is using what I call introductory clauses for direct speech. Let's say the person said cell division occurs in all biological species, claims the author. In this case, if I'm directly reporting this is what I call a direct quote. You might say this. Again, I think the simple present works very well here. Cell division occurs in all biological species, claims the author. To conclude this lesson on the simple present and present progressive, I told you in the beginning of the video that once I discussed the similarities and differences, I would put it within the context of the TOEFL integrated speaking and writing task. And that's exactly what I want to do right now. So ultimately, you have to ask yourself, what are you actually doing when you read something and you listen to something, then you speak about that information? So I think that's the key question. So the TOEFL says that you're actually integrating the information between the two sources. For example, the reading and the listening. You're combining this information, and as you do that, you have to summarize. So then the question is, what is a summary, and what do you do when you're summarizing information? So the purpose of a summary is to take the main point of a reading passage or a lecture and then discuss the most important supporting points of that reading passage or lecture. Am I right? So when you're doing that, the best verb tense is actually the simple present tense. It is not the present progressive tense. That's probably not the best tense for you to use. Why is this true? So when you're summarizing, you're explaining information which is factual. It's facts from the reading, facts from the lecture. So I think you're talking about things in general. You're not talking about something which is happening at the moment of speaking. So that's why I'm saying that the simple present tense works. Also, another reason is, remember, I talked about when you're introducing directly reporting information. That's called quoting. And you're using words like believe or claims or says or argues or contends. And you're also using what I call brain work. And because you're doing that, the simple present tense does work very well in those cases. So for you, you're already on your way to getting a better TOEFL speaking and better writing score. Now, if you think you need more practice and you want to take one of my speaking or writing lessons, I'll be more than happy to listen to your recorded speaking responses. I'll be more than happy to read some of your written responses. on those password protected pages of your lessons, and I will be delighted to give you some feedback on your specific writing and speaking tasks. Obviously, with a little bit of practice and making deliberate decisions about your verb tense and about all kinds of other things, if you make these decisions beforehand, you'll be better equipped to get a much better score and you actually take the TOEFL test.